Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, good afternoon, and thank you for that very lovely introduction. I'm Sandhya Srinivas, and I work with the Pasara Center for Behavioral Economics. I'm also based out of Bangalore, India, which is why it's very dark behind me, in case anyone was wondering. So I worked on this project, and I'm working on this project with Professor Pascaline Dubois from Stanford University. And so what I'm going to be presenting today is a research design for a proposed field experiment. So it is, the effect of local employment generation on financial empowerment and household decision-making of left-behind wives. So to begin with, the Mahadalits is a term that's generally used to refer to a group of marginalized scheduled castes in the Indian state of Bihar. Now, outward migration of male members of this community is often observed. And a predominant reason for that is because of the constant discrimination they face on a day-to-day basis, which is responsible for stripping them of opportunity as well as basic dignity. So for a lot of married men who migrate, the family members they leave behind or that remain includes their wives. So just to give you a profile of these wives, these women can be as young as 14 and have literacy levels as low as 2%. In our population of interest, the same was observed, with the highest level of education being at the primary level and only present in 16% of the women. So what this does is it leaves many of these young adolescent wives vulnerable and unable to create newer opportunities for themselves outside of traditional and mostly exploitative arrangements. Another thing that we observe is that financial empowerment and household decision-making of these wives are very low. So predominant power in families are placed on either the in-laws or other male members of the household. So main question of this research and a main question we wanted to answer was, how can the financial empowerment and the household decision-making of these wives be improved? So what we're currently doing and what we thought of was to make use of an already existing community-based sensitization program in the state of Bihar. So Pathfinder International, which is an international nonprofit, currently runs a reproductive health program called Sashakt. So Sashakt works with the Mahadalit communities of Bihar, and Pathfinder has been working with this community for the last 15 years, and they're the first nonprofit to do so. So a main component of Sashakt is weekly adolescent peer group sessions on sexual and reproductive health topics. These peer group sessions are usually facilitated by a peer educator who is often an adolescent member from the community, male or female. And this is done on a voluntary basis. So our proposed study makes use of this mechanism and would be based on this program. But instead of following a volunteering model, we're going to propose as an intervention that instead compensates these peer educators for their time with a formal wage. This would also act as a much needed employment opportunity within the communities. So just to clarify again, our population of interest would be married adolescent Mahadalit female peer educators who are part of the Sashakt project, as well as their family members. So our primary hypotheses with the study and with this field research is that this employment generation will lead to increased financial empowerment and gradually will seep into the decision-making power of these wives as well. And so to test this, we are planning to use a cluster RCT, a cluster randomized control trial, which will be clustered across 288 villages. And this will be in partnership with Pathfinder International, as well as the government of Bihar, and will be localized to specifically 3 districts in Bihar: Purnia, Katihar, and Araya. So our intervention will consist of 2 main treatments. The primary treatment will be the daily wage, which will be, meant to compensate peer educators for their time. So this daily wage will be set by the government and will be provided to peer educators on a monthly basis. This primary treatment will be randomized across 288 villages. A secondary treatment that we also have in this intervention is community level training program, which includes the family members of the peer educators, discussing the importance of financial management and joint decision making in a household. So the idea behind this secondary treatment is that family members generally can act as a strong barrier to employment and decision making of the women. So, therefore we understand, and therefore we need to have an understanding of how crucial it will be to involve them in order to create sustained change. So just to break it down a lot more clearly, we'll have a control group, which consists of 95 villages. And this control group would be the peer educator program, which runs like usual on a volunteering basis. The first treatment group would be a peer educator program that runs on the wage treatment, where peer educators are not volunteers, but they're actually paid for their time and their service. There'll be a second treatment group, which also has 95 villages, and this will consist of the same wage treatment as the first treatment group, but in addition, we'll also have the community level sensitization and community level training, which seeks to involve the peer educators' families, and that includes, husbands, in-laws, and other members of their extended family. So our expected outcomes, or our outcomes of interest, our primary outcomes of interest is to measure financial empowerment and decision-making of the peer educator. And both of this will be measured via survey instruments at baseline and endline. Our secondary outcome of interest are on peer educators' attitudes on female empowerment and gender norms, and also to have a secondary measure of seeing the attrition rate between the 3 groups, and also performance motivation of the peer educators. So these were some of the sources I used to consult for this project. And finally, most importantly, I wanted to provide a special thanks to my mentor, Pascaline Dupa, who has been a great mentor to me the last 7 months. And we have surprisingly always made this time difference work between us. And finally, to my family, to Nitya, Divya, Chintan, Ma, and Pa, you guys were the perfect test subjects for this presentation, and I hope you're listening, and I am going to ask you questions afterwards. So, yeah. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening to my presentation.